I'm going to make a Pandora style bead. If I were to just make it flat, it would be like making a piece of chenille, and they use a snake chain, which I think is 4 millimeters in diameter, so you'd want the hole to be slightly bigger than 4 mil. Now what I'm going to do, and this is just a flat one, so that would be your roughly 4.2 plus the thickness of your metal times pi, and that would give you the length. Well, to make this little flat one, the length was 16 millimeters. But what I want to do is I want to make this so that it's domed, and to dome it, the edges are going to come in. So I'm going to make this about, this is all part of the big experiment, about 9 millimeters. And this material is 0.7, so it's 9.7 times pi will give me my length. Now this is fairly wide, and that's what I want because I'm going to dome it, and doming both edges will make it narrower. So 0.7 thick, 13 mil wide, and I'll use my brain here and figure out the length. So that says 30 mil, 30. So file your end flat, cut, file the second end flat, anneal. I have my calipers set at 30. Tighten a little screw so it doesn't move, and you can just drag it across the material, hooking it on the one end, hooking it over one end, and you have a nice mark to cut to. I'm using shears for this because I'm lazy. You will just cut it just past the line. And when you do that, when you use shears, it will roll that edge a little bit. Not much of a drama. Your number 2 cut flat hand file, and you file it back until you have a nice flat edge. If you don't, what will happen is when you try to solder the two edges together, there will be a little depression that the solder won't fill. So if you use the shears, it's fine. Just be sure that you always file the end of the metal. 1/4 of a turn with your gas. If you have an air gap here, turn it down so you don't have an air gap. Otherwise it'll just blow the flame out when you add oxygen. And oxygen just until the orange goes out. So that's neutral flame. Heat your metal until it's a dull red. And when you're using a charcoal block like I do, make sure that there's no flux underneath where you're heating it. Otherwise it'll put a little mark in it. So quench it in water. Pickle it. I'm going to stamp a message in it, and because I'm terrible at lining up my stamps, I'll just tape my little steel ruler in place. Work out my message. So now you can just slide your letter right down to the ruler. Give it one good whack. Don't try to hit it twice. Now hallmark it because this is small enough that if you wait until it's all formed and sanded, you won't be able to hallmark it. Now, if you didn't hit the ends, and if you didn't have a really big pattern that you stamped on this should still be annealed enough that you can form it. And I'm just going to use my flat round pliers. Grab the end. Make sure that the metal sticks out past the end because you don't want to deform the metal. Well, you want to deform it into an oval, but you don't want to deform the very end. So just bring the ends together to make this as perfect as you can. Take your time, make sure the edges are lined up, and make sure the edges are nice and tightly together. Now, if you get your material so it's like this, it's almost together. You can see that little gap. You can tap it with your rawhide hammer and it will bring those edges together. Now it has to be slightly angled up and almost touching so that when you tap it down it touches. So get it as perfect as possible and then we'll solder it. So stir up your flux, make sure you have this nice, slightly watery, creamy flux, and we're going to just paint a line of flux down the outside. Now at this point you could cut a piece of solder on your charcoal block. I say charcoal block, but it could just as easily be a ceramic block. A soldering pad, they call that. And what you could do is you could sit the join right on that piece of solder so that when you heat this up and the solder flows with the capillary action, capillary for the North America, what happens is when the solder flows, because the two bits of metal are touching, the solder will flow pretty much the whole space. And with you heating from up here, solder tends to run towards the hottest part. So this is perfect. This would work perfectly. You could put your solder on top, place it on top, on the join, heat so that your flame is brushing towards the bottom of this, right in this area, just in front of it. When the metal gets warm enough for the solder to flow, it will flow, and because of the capillary action, it'll go down towards the bottom where the more heat is. That's two ways. For me, I usually can't be bothered. I just put this in my third hand, joint up, because at this point I don't have any pattern on this that I have to worry about the solder filling. If I had a pattern, I would put the solder on the inside and I would heat from the inside. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to heat on the outside. The other way, the fourth way for this, heat your solder on your soldering block, pick it up with your solder pick, heat up the metal until the flux goes clear, place your solder with the pick. Really, there is no correct way to do this. If anybody tells you that there's only one way to do something, disbelieve them. But don't argue with them until you've actually tried a few different ways to do things. So I have my nice neutral flame. You can see that the flux has gone clear. I'll zoom in so you can see. So you can see my piece of solder here. Heat the metal, and I'm basically just kind of circling around the top of it because I want the whole thing warm. So the flux has gone clear, and the solder will flow. And it will flow down the whole length of this. See that? Very nice, if I do say so myself. Quench this in water and pickle it.